Taoiseach and Mrs Martin, Prime Minister Carney and Madam Fox Carney, Taoiseach, Ambassador King, members of the Oireachtas, General and Mrs de Chastelaine, members of the Ireland-Canada University Foundation, Chair of the Trinity Board Paul Farrell, distinguished guests, staff, students and friends of Trinity College. I'm just so delighted to be here on this wonderful occasion. Tá fáilte mór roimh go léir go dtí coláiste tróna don ó céad speisialta seo inmh. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all this afternoon to the inaugural de Chastelaine Public Lecture. General de Chastelaine, I'm delighted you're here and really thrilled that Trinity is hosting the lecture in your name. The patience and persistence you have brought to the peace process in Ireland will not be forgotten, and we, all of us, are deeply grateful to you for your service and leadership. I think that was very, very heartfelt. Prime Minister Carney, I'm just so thrilled you're here with us in Trinity. It matters to me hugely that the person who made that speech in Davos is here in Trinity. You're so much more than... You are so much more than that one speech. But that one speech mattered so much. And to put that in context here and now, next week this hall will be filled with talented and hopeful students graduating from Trinity. I cannot but think that they're heading into a very troubled world. It's hugely important in that troubled world they can also see that there are people who will stand up and offer a vision and a way forward. You did that in spades in Davos, and more importantly still, your actions follow your words. In my few words here today, I would like to say to you, drawing on your words from Davos, that I believe that universities have a big role to play in wielding the power of legitimacy, integrity and rules, and working together to help create that third path with impact that you spoke about. Here in Trinity, legitimacy and integrity are central to how we both serve and challenge society, even more so in a world of conflict, climate and biodiversity crisis, and rapidly evolving AI technologies. And we know too that working together is essential in finding the kinds of solutions the world needs. This is an international and outward-looking university. And I'm happy to say that we welcome over 200 Canadian students here each year. Over the last 4 years alone, we have collaborated with 125 Canadian institutions, academic, medical, government and corporate. And in that time, Trinity researchers have co-authored over 1,300 publications with Canadian researchers, and that collaboration output is growing. At Davos, you pointed out that the multilateral institutions on which the middle powers have relied, architectures of collective problem solving, as you call them, are under threat. Your examples of the WTO, the UN and the COP were given. But there is one architecture of a multilateral collective problem solving nature that is still intact, and of which Ireland is a key member. From my perspective, this is the EU Framework Programme for Research. It's much more than a funding mechanism. It's a multicultural, multilingual vehicle for the deep valued-based international cooperation you are advocating for. Canada is one of the 22 countries from outside the EU which enjoys associated membership, and many more are waiting to join. As Ireland heads into its presidency of the Council of the EU, I say that this is a substantial soft power, or if bolstered further, could even be a superpower of the EU, and it's worth fighting for. As is ensuring that Canada has a speedy accession to the next framework programme, FP10. We can together up our game, and this can be a foundation for real competitiveness. Competitiveness is one of the key priorities of Ireland's presidency, and universities in Ireland and Canada and across Europe can be places where that competitiveness can be accelerated, underpinned by a value set and an integrity that makes this fight worth it. And all of this I can say in a different way by borrowing a phrase from Pope Leo, magnificent humanity. And while he used this in the context of his encyclical on AI, I think it's a phrase that resounds much more. In Trinity style, and an acknowledgement of this theatre in which our graduation ceremonies take place, in Latin no less, I say, Universitatem decet pro magnifica humanitate certare. It's fitting and proper for a university to fight for the magnificence of humanity. And as we look at the world today, it's right that we all here fight for the magnificence of humanity. And Mark Carney is the kind of leader who gives us hope for that fight. So I could not finish without mentioning Mayo, of course. Two of my three immediate predecessors as provost came from Mayo. Our former Chancellor, Mary Robinson, came from Mayo, from Ballina. And more precisely still, to mention the most important place in Mayo, among thousands of treasures in our wonderful library is the 9th century Book of Armagh, which mentions Ahagaur as the location where St. Patrick himself chose to build a church. So, Prime Minister Carney, gur raibh maithagad as uachta ceannaireachta le 100,000 agus 100,000 fáilte roid. Thank you for your leadership and welcome to Trinity College Dublin. We're so delighted and proud to have you here.
Thank you, Provost. That was extraordinary. I'm not sure I have much to add, I'm afraid, but I'm going to. Taoiseach, dear Micheál, Deputy Prime Minister Simon, Provost Doyle, fellows, students, distinguished guests, it is my brother. It is a great privilege to join you all here at Trinity College for this inaugural lecture named after or in the honor of a truly remarkable individual. After a lifetime of service, General John de Chastelain's seminal work was to come, which was to help forge and implement the Good Friday Agreement. Now, peace is never guaranteed. It cannot simply be signed into reality. It has to be brokered, built, and embodied by brave and compassionate individuals such as John de Chastelain. And it's my honor to be speaking today under the banner of your name. Thank you. And it is my honor to be here at Trinity College Dublin, much more than a university. A veritable wellspring of ideas, inventions, and, as we just heard from the Provost, enduring moral clarity. Some of the world's greatest contributions to science, art, literature have their roots here. Trinity alumni invented the steam turbine, the modern stethoscope, pioneered radiotherapy, linear algebra, coined the term electron, introduced the world to Count Dracula and Dorian Gray, Gulliver and Godot, who should be here any minute. There you go, that's my joke. Trinity students today, the graduates you'll soon welcome in this great hall, are building on this legacy, and as the Provost just underscored, Canadians are sharing in this quest. And for their benefit, I will say a few words in our other official language. Aujourd'hui, je parlerai de l'importance de la relation entre le Canada, l'Irlande et l'Europe, de notre vision transatlantique commune et unique, des choix auxquels nous sommes confrontés est déterminant, influent et une force pour le bien au cours du siècle à venir. Et de l'impératif qui est le nôtre, bâtir avec ambition et bâtir ensemble, guidés par nos valeurs et notre perspective commune. Canada and Ireland are transatlantic nations. I'm going to call to mind a story my parents tell me, and that many will know. 15 centuries ago, St. Brendan, the navigator, stood on Ireland's shore and looked west. He built a curragh, and with his companions set sail into the unknown, guided by little more than faith, curiosity, and a conviction that whatever lay west was worth discovering. Those early Irish voyagers realized the Atlantic did not separate worlds but connected them. Now, centuries later, as Western civilization went through a period of profound upheaval, Irish monks collected, illuminated, and preserved the books and the ideas that were being lost in the tumult. Plato and Aristotle for reason, Horace and Homer for poetry, the Book of Kells for prayer. That tradition continued here at Trinity, which became the center for the Irish Enlightenment. First, as a refuge for debate and knowledge, but then as that beacon of wisdom and truth. In the classrooms, Irish authors, artists, economists, philosophers, I snuck economists in there, there must have been some, used ideas such as St. Brendan, or just as St. Brendan used his curragh to connect worlds. Now, in truth, it's not recorded whether St. Brendan and his companions landed in Canada, but let's just say that they did. But I can tell you that the first Irish person to officially make the journey was Ty Gobrennan of County Kilkenny, who arrived in Quebec in 1661. I will also note that his 11th grandson, Scott Gilmore, is here today. Come on. Yeah. Well, Brennan was followed by waves of migration as the Irish became one of Canada's largest communities. They didn't inherit or they didn't land on a country that had been completed. They helped build it into the strong and proud nation it is today. The Irish revolutionary Thomas D'Arcy McGee became a Canadian father of Confederation, a contribution we've memorialized by putting his name on the pub next to my office. Very handy. It's easy for me to remember that one. John McCall, alumnus of this college, became the University of Toronto's second president and the person who shaped that great university's early years and set the very high bar for its ambitions. Louise McKinney, whose family emigrated from County Cavan to Alberta, became the first woman elected to a legislature in the British Empire. Irish labourers built one of Canada's first nation-building projects, the Rideau Canal, which I cross on my way to Parliament every day and on which locals skate every winter. With each decade, each passing century, our relationship between our countries has become stronger. And today, our two nations have never been more connected by the Atlantic, by blood, by ideas, by commerce. As an economist, I have to give you some figures. Over the last decade, our trade has grown, as the Taoiseach knows, by 150%. Canada is now Ireland's fourth largest trading partner outside of the EU. Over 75 Canadian companies operate here with over 26,000 employees. Irish companies employ over 30,000 people across Canada. Every year, almost 500,000 journeys are made between Canada and Ireland as students, tourists, entrepreneurs, and friends bring our nations closer together. We shouldn't be surprised by this. St. John's, Newfoundland is 1,700 kilometers closer to Ireland than it is to Vancouver. It takes 3 hours less to fly here. We're more than partners, we're family, brothers and sisters, literally and figuratively. Our troops have served together on peacekeeping missions from Cyprus to East Timor. Our scientists have made discoveries together in quantum physics and geology, and more are promised, as we just heard. We share the fundamental values of sustainability, inclusivity, solidarity, and dignity for all. We're both proudly bilingual nations. And we care about our economies, but we're passionate about building strong economies as a means to just society. Just society where we take care of the vulnerable. Just society where you can love who you want to love. Just society where everyone can be their entire selves and all have a chance to thrive. So with this common history, with these shared values, we have developed a unique worldview, transatlantic worldview, if you will, rooted in a simple but profound conviction that we are stronger when we are connected, that our prosperity grows when it's shared, and that we are the stewards of our lands. Trinity alumnus Edmund Burke describes society as a partnership between those who are living, those who are dead, and those who are yet to be born. Long before globalization, Burke understood that societies thrive not in isolation, but through webs of connections, obligations, responsibilities, and trust, stretching across borders and across generations. And at times that means adapting and improving institutions while we preserve what is still working. It also means building with speed, scale, and ambition while remaining anchored in our values. And for Canada and Ireland, it means harnessing our deep relationships as sources of strength. And this is an urgent task now, because the world is changing rapidly. Ireland and Canada are navigating a global rupture, not a quiet transition. The post-Cold War world of rules-based order is breaking down. Multilateral institutions have weakened. Economic integration, from which we have benefited, is being weaponized. The international trading system, which we've relied upon for decades, is under threat. And at the same time, new technologies from artificial intelligence to cyber and quantum are changing the nature of war, the structure of economies, and the possibilities of human advancement. Climate change is no longer a warning, it's here. Last month, as you know and you felt, Ireland experienced its hottest May on record. In Canada last year, forests larger than Ireland burned in the drought and heat. Global conflicts are expanding and evolving. They're more than kinetic, as horrible as that is. They're economic, they're social, they're technological. Canada, Ireland, and Europe are increasingly and more immediately vulnerable to once distant threats. And I suggest that amidst this change, amidst this disruption, Canada, Ireland, and Europe can be pivotal, powerful, and purposeful, a force for good. Pivotal because we are the most connected region in the world, to each other and to others. Canada has 16 free trade agreements with 51 countries, covering 1.5 billion people, 2/3 of global GDP, and we're on course to double that market access this year. The EU maintains preferential access to over 80 partner countries, making it the top trading partner for 80 nations globally. Together we are powerful because we have the capacity to act together. Combined, the population is more than twice that of the United States. We have a larger cultural export industry and a more diverse one, I might add, a similarly sized GDP, comparable R&D spend. Our collective defense budget's twice that of China's. We're home to the majority of the world's top 100 universities and over half of the world's Nobel Prize winners. So together, we are one of the largest economic, cultural, technological, financial blocs in the world. But to what purpose? Well, we are and can be a force for good because we safeguard the values of human rights, of dignity and pluralism that our people hold dear. As with Burke's maxim, Canada and Ireland recognize our debt to those who built what we've inherited and our duty to those who will come after. So I'm going to make an analogy. Just as Irish monks centuries ago preserved, copied, and taught classical knowledge amid the Dark Ages, we must preserve and defend our values, our traditions, our interests during this rupture. For this to happen, we need to act. We need to build again as we did before. Back in the 19th century, 1866, engineers laid the first telegraph cable along the floor of the Atlantic from Valencia Island off the coast of Kerry to Heart's Content in Newfoundland. It was considered wildly ambitious, it was hugely expensive at the time, and all previous attempts had failed, but it pushed the boundaries of what was possible. It was a cable that made the modern world possible. A world where messages and ideas that once took weeks to travel by ship then could travel within minutes. We're now in a position where the 6 million printed volumes in Trinity College Library, the accumulated knowledge of centuries, in the time it takes me to finish this sentence, the entire contents of this library will have passed back and forth across the ocean more than 40 times. This is what becomes possible when we choose to build together with ambition. Now, to make all of this practical, let me highlight 3 principles to help us build the key elements of that new order that preserves and lives our values. And the first is to recognize that as the requirements for sovereignty evolve, so must we. Right now, many countries, ourselves included, are concluding that they must develop greater strategic autonomy. And the impulse for that is understandable. Because when the rules no longer protect you, you must protect yourself. And a country that cannot feed itself, fuel itself, or defend itself has few options. But in the 21st century, the economic security and prosperity of our countries extends far beyond food, conventional energy, and security, as important and as fundamental as these are. Today, sovereignty requires reliable access to semiconductors, to space-based communications. It requires unhindered access to artificial intelligence, the latest models for protection as well as knowledge creation, critical minerals, payment systems, clean energy technologies, vaccines. Now, because over decades, governments and businesses prioritized efficiency over resilience, we all have developed supply chains and trading relationships that create dependencies that can turn economic integration from an advantage, which is what it was, into subordination. And so Canada's strategic imperative is to build sovereign capabilities and resiliencies in these key areas. That starts at home. We're fast-tracking $1 trillion of investment in energy, AI, critical minerals, new trade corridors. We're investing to double our clean electricity grid. We're investing in quantum. We're building our food security. But we recognize a second principle, that building true sovereignty cannot be achieved in isolation. It requires diversification. It requires partnership. And so we are focused on building a dense web of connections, said another way, ad hoc coalitions that work issue by issue with partners that share enough common ground to act together. And that's why Canada was the first non-European country to join the EU's Safe Defence Procurement Program. It's why we've signed 20 new economic and security agreements over 5 continents in the past year. It's why we're championing efforts to build a bridge between the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the European Union, something that would create a trading bloc of 1.5 billion people, a rules-based trading bloc of 1.5 billion people. These coalitions are also there to help solve global problems with a rules-based order that's under threat, the so-called variable geometry. In other words, building coalitions that focus on specific issues, from AI with India and Australia to our critical minerals alliance with the G7 to nuclear energy with South Africa. These are examples of what Canada is doing. The point is that in a world of great power rivalry, middle powers have a choice, which is to compete for favor of the great powers or to combine to create a third path with impact. The nations that invest in their own capabilities and partner with like-minded allies will multiply their strength. They become a more effective bloc to deter aggression, to protect their supply chains, and to realize their core economic interests, and because of the economic interests, their social values. My third point is that Canada and Ireland are exceptionally well placed to seize this moment. We can build across technology, biotech, agri-food, can leverage our strengths, our trust, and our ambition because we share the values and the common history that bind our communities and our businesses together. And because we also know that it's not just what we build, but it's how we build it. We must build inclusively, sustainably, and in solidarity. Together, we can build a more resilient, more prosperous, and sustainable world for our children. A world where a web of connections better prepares us for future shocks. A world that's truly multipolar, where we play a moderating role. And above all, a more humane world that is just, honest, and compassionate. So allow me to close this first de Chastelain lecture by a few humble reflections on the manner of the General's great achievement. John de Chastelain imagined better possibilities that others did not see. He was ambitious, and he understood the power of connection, of responsibility, and of trust. And for us, gathered here to honor his legacy, this is our charge. We must imagine better possibilities. We must recognize the importance of our shared worldview, of our connections. Weave those connections, the obligations, the responsibility, the trust across borders and generations. And if we do this, we can build together and with ambition. And we can arrive at that future worthy of those who are living, those who are dead, and those who are yet to be born. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, and I look forward to it.
Goramila Mahagut Fein as an Oroid Shin, on Simul, on Spragul. Thank you for that really interesting, very interesting and stimulating speech. We were just saying as we were sitting down as well, they didn't put us in the seats behind because whatever about getting into them, I'm not sure if we'd be able to get out of them very easily. Thank you for such an interesting speech. As you've mentioned, and you were with the Taoiseach earlier today, you're going to Mayo tomorrow, which I'm sure will be a very exciting prospect. But then after the weekend, you're going back to France, having been there this week, for the critical G7 summit. And I wonder, the reference, of course, has been made again to your Davos speech, the rupture, the breakdown in the world order, essentially. Certainly the institutions that we're familiar with are under pressure. Is there a prospect at all at this meeting for even the beginnings of a sense of what a new order might look like? I mean, I'm conscious of the old Antonio Gramsci quote that the old world is dead, but the new one cannot yet be born. Are we still in that phase? Is it too much to hope for just some strands of possibility and opportunity in Paris, in France?
Yes, possibly. Certainly, here's a safe answer. The strands of that new order yet to be born could be woven in Evian, which is the G7, and maybe I'll justify that. First, who's at the table? It's more than the G7. More than half the meeting will include so-called outreach partners, particularly India, the leaders of India, the leaders of Brazil, the Gulf states as well, the leader of Kenya, Mr. Ruto, will be there. So a series of other partners which bring a broader perspective and a broader element of the solution. So that's the first. And it's a recognition that the G7, if it ever did run the world, no longer runs the world or pretends to. The second is there are a few issues that are moving, in my judgment, quite rapidly, where this absence of rules or standards or common coordination are laying bare the risks that we're running. And sometimes I'll suggest that it's easier to solve a new problem than it is to go back and fix the enduring one. And I'll make that tangible, which is that AI is effectively unregulated as we sit here. There are initiatives at the national level, the initiatives coming at the European level. We are taking measures, but the training of models, the accessibility to models and agents is unregulated. That has issues from perspective of child safety. There are other issues, but one of the other issues which is becoming more apparent is issues in terms of systemic risk to, for example, cyber or hacking, the ability to hack systems, whether they're in the financial sector, whether they would be other systemic infrastructure, utilities, and other aspects. The ability to share the defenses, or the importance of sharing the defensive, having common standards, not releasing models that have that power before others are ready, that is an imperative. That is something I'm certain we will be discussing at the G7. Will there be a magic communique that answers that question? No. Could there be the outlines of the answer and a sense of urgency to develop and implement the standards? I think that is possible. So that is a test of whether we move beyond Gramsci, so to speak.
Interesting, because you were reflecting on sovereignty, and it's very interesting the sense that you have, and President Macron has made similar points about sovereignty and what it means. And our traditional sense of what sovereignty is, of course, is kind of disappearing, and certainly territoriality, territorial integrity, and these things. Of course, these are minor matters now compared to the bigger questions that you've touched on. I wonder, would you elaborate on that and pick up maybe on the point that you've just been making, that in a sense the challenges are they're not just state to state. It's not a question of states seeing themselves vis-a-vis the other state, as I say, like territory or whatever. These are the much bigger cross-cutting questions: technology, AI, resilience generally in the world. Is that what sovereignty and advancing sovereignty means for you, strengthening resilience?
So to go to a very basic level, you know far a richer sense than I, but sovereignty includes the ability to decide. And what we've discovered is that, yes, it's not just the conventional aspects, although we do obviously have horrific violations of territorial integrity and traditional sovereignty, food being used as a weapon in war as well as others. But the ties between nations being used as extreme leverage to dictate policies more broadly. So the lesson we and others are taking from that is, in order to develop that greater strategic autonomy, you either have to be an exceptional country that can do everything for themselves, not many of those around, and certainly if you're a middle power, you're not going to discover that, or you have to find partners, not just one partner, but multiple partners, so you have some resiliency, some redundancy, some diversification, but those partners should be first and foremost countries with whom you agree on most things. And what we're discovering as Canada is that, well, we end up at the table with Ireland. We end up at the table with Ireland for the coalition of the willing for Ukraine. Okay? We all know Ireland's history of neutrality and focus on defense and security, but a commitment to peacekeeping. So being there so that when there is a peace, that peace can be held and reconstruction be there. We end up with Ireland, Ukrainian children, Michal and I, we were there. We are with Ireland in a series of, and Ireland and the European Union on a series of these economic issues of economic standards and integration. I won't go into the detail on that. So when you're together for the outcomes which reveal your values, then you think, well, I'm more likely to be able to rely upon that partner if it's knitting together my intelligence infrastructure, to talk about AI, or my critical minerals in order for my battery chain, because we're not going to be in conflict, I think. I mean, it's revealed preference, to put it in a fancy term, I guess. Now, you asked at the start of your question a critical element here, which is basically the power of the, I'll say it, of the hyperscalers, but the large technology companies, the transnational technology companies, and how that potentially impinges on sovereignty, and how one repatriates sovereignty in a hyper-connected world. And that is one of the fundamental issues. It is one of the fundamental issues, and it is not as, part of it is about the actual hardware, physical infrastructure, but that's only a component of it. And it goes to the ability, which is exceptionally difficult, to develop some of the core technologies yourself with like-minded partners. In other words, and the line is, not to be caught between the hegemons and the hyperscalers, and accepting a degree of being 80 to 90% at the frontier, but with sovereignty. And that, in some cases explicitly, many cases implicitly, is what nations are working through right now in real time.
And isn't there an added dimension to the challenge, which is as between state actors and private actors, in a sense? So we've seen SpaceX just yesterday, the unbelievable expanses that are there, and opportunities and possibilities. Can citizens across the world, can they have confidence in their leaders to, as it were, to be able themselves to understand the extraordinary changes that are happening, often progressed by private actors, requiring then presumably to be regulated by states and by public actors. But do governments, I don't personalize this to you, but you can answer yourself if you would, do governments and do prime ministers and leaders actually understand sufficiently the nature of the expansion that's happening so as to be able to get hold of it?
Well, okay, there's multiple levels of that. Obviously, in terms of the technologies, no. I'll simplify it. What do governments understand? Governments understand power and all the different levers of power. Governments understand influence. Ideally, they're rooted in the values of their citizenry, and they understand have a reasonable sense of where policy has leverage, or government action has leverage. Sometimes the scale of that leverage is either too little or much too strong relative to expectations, and you find that through, particularly with emerging technologies, you find that through trial and error, and ideally another country has done the trial first, or had the error first, and you can have the successful trial. So and then, the other element that's incumbent on a government is to be able to pull in the perspective. These are not black box companies. We take the domain of artificial intelligence. There is deep knowledge in artificial intelligence. Some of the founders, for example, of artificial intelligence, true founders, are basically researchers, public servant, somewhere on that spectrum, NGO type, resident in Canada. I think of Joshua Bengio as an example, Geoffrey Hinton as another example. There are a number of people who have perspectives on the technology and the implications of the technology that, and I'm not saying that everybody is compromised in the private sector in the technology by any stretch, but they're objective in their perspectives, and you need to draw on those at the same time you're drawing on the private act.
Yeah, I suppose it's just, we're all preoccupied by this question, and certainly we in the Institute of International European Affairs, which is where I work here in Dublin, really trying to wrestle with this sort of what is the right configuration between regulation, state intervention, let the private sector get on with innovating and developing, or is there some new configuration, some new relationship between public and private where the world can actually get to grips with this? But I mean, there are some of the issues I think we'll look at, and I'm sure you'll be looking at and all considering all the time. Can I just ask you a question about climate? Because you made reference to it, and you have frequently made reference to it. And in fact, going right back, I remember in 2015, when you were Governor of the Bank of England, you made that speech about the tragedy of the horizons. There were 2 or 3 tragedies, but one of them was the tragedy of the horizons. And this sense that, the generational challenge that's there, that you said in your speech earlier, climate change is here, we can see it. But an awful lot of the discourse is people kind of thinking it's really in the future, and it makes it harder for leaders, frankly, to actually get action, because people, and your quote from Edmund Burke is very telling, the sense that the world is made, that society, I've forgotten the exact words, but those who are alive today, those who were there in the past, and those yet to come. And isn't that a very useful way of thinking about the climate discourse, as you did in that speech back in, and also I think I saw you making a similar point in Dubai, at the COP in Dubai, about if you pull back, you're leaving the burden to the future generations. So this is what we're doing. If we don't act today, someone else will have to act. So it's the people, in Burke's quote, it's the people yet to be born.
So you framed the problem brilliantly. And the challenge in climate and many other, as you know, public policy issues, and certainly the front row there knows this well, is that doing the right thing, living up to Burke, if I use the quote, the proof of being right, or the payback, is beyond your political cycle, potentially certainly the electoral cycle, often beyond your career, even if you're very successful. And that's the challenge. So how do you mitigate that, or how do you address it? And there's no perfect answer, but a few ways to do it. One is that, and part of the point that I had been making, which has worked to a degree, but not fully, I'll be clear, was that this relationship between what society values and what is valued in the market, and that to the extent to which there is a genuine desire for climate change to be addressed in one way, shape, or form, if you have better information in the market and some sense of where regulation and other things are going to go, that will be pulled forward, that it will pull forward the adjustment. Some of that happens, but it's not happening to the same degree, in part because of breakdown. So that's the first thing. And I think part of the breakdown, or the not breakdown's a bit strong, but the lessening of climate action is because of the affordability crisis that families are facing for a variety of other reasons. And it means that we have to adapt our instruments in order to do it. And one of the things that we're doing is to focus in on where can we have major climate returns by reducing emissions that actually help our businesses become competitive and do so in a way that doesn't hit the pocketbook of Canadian families. In order to do that, and the short answer on that is on electricity and doubling the grid, and we're fortunate we have a lot of opportunities to do it, but we are going to need to do that in a way that spreads the cost over a long period of time, which means we have to use the government balance sheet explicitly, because otherwise the current generation is paying too much for the future generations. I know it's an odd way to say it's benefit, but it's a reduced harm to the future generation. There's a lot more behind that sentence, but that's part of the solution that's there. I'll just say one other thing that we have done, and I think to the credit of Canadian voters, is we have maintained our international climate assistance and finance commitments in Canada. Well, others have reduced them because there is still this sense of, well, we can do a certain amount in Canada, the bigger returns are going to be outside.
Okay, I finish perhaps just because I know there's a tight schedule, and I'm quite certain the trip to Mayo is going to be a very exciting one and perhaps very moving one for you, although I know you've been in Ireland before, but not as Prime Minister. This morning, I texted an old friend of mine that I went to college with here in Trinity, and he's been living in Canada all his life. So I just thought, hell, I'll just text him and ask him what he thinks, Mark Carney. So I did. Don't worry. I've left out the...
Did I mention the tight schedule?
So he sent me quite a long text, but one of the things he said was, quote, he is the archetypical old-school Canadian, almost a poster boy for that modest but tough, capable dude, super pragmatic and very, very smart. Reputed to have a short fuse occasionally, but a master of restraint too. So that's an Irish guy living in Canada for 40 years, observing you and getting a pretty good sense of what you're like. And I'm wondering, as you go to Mayo tomorrow, and this is a hard question, it's hard for any of us to answer, like where do we get the qualities or where do we get the strengths and weaknesses? Do you think you've carried any of your, well, shall I say, strengths or weaknesses with you from your Irish roots? Or what kinds of things do you see in Ireland or you're conscious of in Ireland that you're kind of, you feel a strange sort of familiarity with?
Wow.
There better be something good.
Better be something good. Look, what do I associate? I didn't see that coming. So this is a free association answer. One, so there's certainly an element of hard work and the importance of education and hard work. The two Irish traits, core Irish traits. Whether you're from Cork, Kilkenny, Mayo, County Cavan, that's there. So certainly those. Secondly, and I'm not the best expression of this, but a lyrical quality, if I can put it that way, which is, across music and literature and poetry, and a sense of that is like the richness of life that's there, and it transcends across social circumstance or generation that is there. I'm duty bound because there's a big match tomorrow. A competitiveness and a will to win that comes with Mayo and their superior supporting. No, I think those are it's that combination that one has, and if you have a sense of, as one does, and I'll say this and I'll let it finish. I mean, my brother's here, and I think it's fair that our parents grew up certainly my father grew up in an Irish household in Canada. Both parents came over from Ireland, lots of friends in Ireland, and that was very strong. And so those characteristics is kind of shone through them, and there was enough left that I picked up those characteristics. I'm trying to remember everything that says restraint, dude, and typical Canadians. So that sounds like a good place to wrap it up.
I won't remind you of the short fuse, but he said a model of restraint as well when required. So
restraint when
required.
So,
no, listen, thank you very much, Prime Minister Mark Carney. Thank you very much for your time.